elites. I think it is also important to recognize the power of the International Criminal Court and to put forward that message that the International Criminal Court, as an arbiter for crimes against humanity, must be brought to bear to begin to put pressure to stem the flow of violence and repression against the protesters, against the pro-democracy forces there in Libya.
You know, there appears to be a major change of tone from the United States. Just in the past few hours, we've had a statement released by Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Up to now, the United States have been talking about Gaddafi, getting rid of Gaddafi, but that would be a decision for the Libyan people. But now Secretary Clinton is saying Muammar Gaddafi has lost the confidence of his people and he should go without further bloodshed and violence. What's the significance of that statement now?
I think it is important for the U.S., for the United Nations to play this role, to have a united voice in support of the pro-democracy forces there in Libya. I think it is critical to recognize that the will of the people has been heard now for the past few weeks, and to stand against this movement of further violence that is having escalating numbers. The numbers are now over 1,000 people that have been killed. I think it is important for the international community to use whatever tools within its toolkit to be able to put pressure to bear, to support the forces of democracy, to support the protesters, to support this movement for change there in Libya.
Amira, you're a seasoned Africa watcher. We've talked about other governments, other leaders in Africa many, many times. From what you know, is Colonel Gaddafi a man who's prepared to negotiate? Is he a man who's prepared to step down?
I think what we have seen already is that what you have is a chameleon who wants to hold on to power at all costs, will say whatever is necessary to hold on to power, including, absurd statements that the people are still supporting him. So I think what we have is a ruling elite, not only Gaddafi, but all those that have stood with him, have continued to stand with him in spite of the atrocities of the past week, especially. I think what you have is a sense that they have held on to power for 40+ years and want to continue to hold on to power at all costs, in spite of the will of the people being so clearly heard in the streets throughout the country, including even in Tripoli.
Now, looking at the situation on the ground, Amira, we're hearing that large numbers of African migrants to Libya are leaving because they're worried that they might be mistaken for mercenaries. And we know that mercenaries that Colonel Gaddafi has recruited in places like Chad, in places like Niger, have been used against the protesters.
Well, this is a very sad situation that's happening. Clearly, the links that Gaddafi has had with rebel movements in Chad, also in Mali, in a number of countries, that those assets are now being brought to bear in support of Gaddafi and his quest to hold on to power. I think there is a concern, though, that that there's a broad brush being used now that could be actually discriminating against African migrants who were there to work in the oil industry and in other industries there in Libya, against those who were actually coming to have refuge, economic refuge, finding jobs in Libya to try to survive when their countries, whether Mali or Senegal or neighboring countries, were having such tight economic times with this global recession. And then, of course, we have indigenous black Libyans, that are also concerned that they may be caught in this web now of discrimination and potential retaliation with the use of mercenaries now in Libya. So I think there is a concern that there aren't further violations of human rights, particularly of those of darker complexion, of those of the black race.
Amira Woods in Washington, thanks for your insights today into what is going on in Libya.
Thank you.
Now, China has stepped up its efforts to get more than 30,000 of its citizens from Libya as the crisis escalates. A ferry carrying more than 2,000 Chinese workers arrived in Malta on Saturday. Cal Perry was there to meet them.
Weary faces tell the story of a difficult journey across rough waters. These 2,000 workers were just evacuated from Benghazi and brought here to Malta. An unusual scene as a Chinese flag is unfurled on an Italian ship in a European harbor.
My two best friends, they're still upstairs in this cruise. They were sick. They couldn't get off the bed because in the past one day and night, this journey in the sea, it's really tough for us. The ship is shaking really badly, and they throw up a lot of times, and they headache. They didn't eat anything in the whole day and night.
Doesn't matter. Maltese authorities tend to those who are most in need. Others huddle inside, eating hot food brought fresh for them. The smiles of those who have just arrived reflect only the relief of being somewhere safe, but memories of what these workers fled from come rushing back.
People, they come in to attack us. They use the steel bar, this knife, like this long, and they hijacked our trucks, cranes, and every machine and materials they can get. Look at my face. This is. I hope my mom and dad won't see me like this, but we just been through a lot of, and it's a tough week.
Now, in safe waters, everyone's trying to find a signal, eager to both receive information and let their loved ones know they've gotten out safely. While the Chinese workers are being offloaded from this ship and taken to the airport to catch a flight home, you can see behind me the HMS Cumberland preparing to go back to Benghazi and carry out further evacuations. Cal Perry, Al Jazeera, aboard the cruise Roma in Malta.
In Egypt, presidential terms may be limited to 8 years. That's one of the proposed changes to the constitution that will be put to a referendum ahead of elections later this year. Meanwhile, the ruling military council has apologized after security forces beat protesters during overnight demonstrations in Cairo. It said the violence was the result of unintentional confrontations between the military police and the youth of the revolution. Thousands demonstrated in Tahrir Square on Friday, calling for a faster implementation of reforms. A cabinet reshuffle by the King of Bahrain has done little to satisfy thousands of anti-government protesters. The demonstrators gathered at Pearl Roundabout in the capital, Manama. They then marched along a major highway blocking traffic. Police were deployed but did not intervene. It comes as a prominent leader from the country's Shia opposition arrived home from exile. In his absence, Hassan Mushaima was being tried for allegedly plotting a coup. But according to Bahrain's foreign minister, he's now been granted a royal pardon. Officials in New Zealand say at least a third of the buildings in central Christchurch must be demolished and rebuilt after Tuesday's earthquake. The city's mayor, Bob Parker, says serious questions need to be asked about why some of them collapsed. 145 people died in the quake and more than 200 are still missing. Andrew Thomas reports.
What the earthquake didn't pull down, machines now razed to the ground. This was Brent Smith's bed and breakfast.
There's the saying, you don't know whether to laugh or cry. I mean, I haven't stopped shaking since they started, and it's just history, you know, it's history gone.
The house was 155 years old. It was gone in an hour and a half. This is just one of many hundreds of buildings that will have to be demolished over the next weeks and months. In the city centre, 1 in 3 buildings assessed so far has been found to be structurally unsound. The precariousness of so many buildings makes the work of the rescue and body recovery teams that much harder, as aftershocks continue to bring masonry down. In the suburbs, different problems. One, silt. When the quake hit in a process called liquefaction, muddy water bubbled up through the ground. This is what it's left behind. Many suburbs still have no power nor water, so volunteers 30 kilometres from Christchurch have started a production line of hot food. A local helicopter company then flies in to pick it up.
As of yesterday, we flew in 12,000 kgs of hot food, hot meals into some of the poorest and hardest hit suburbs of Christchurch.
This is where the meals end up. When the residents of Burwood hear the rotor blades, they flock.
We had grilled cheese sandwiches on the barbecue the first night, so this is much better.
Because you can't store food with no refrigeration, it's, this is a good proper meal.
Streets can be cleaned, power will return, but buildings and people in Christchurch are gone forever. The city will never be what it was before. Andrew Thomas, Al Jazeera, Christchurch.
Enda Kenny, leader of Ireland's Fine Gael party, says he expects to form the country's next government. Early results put the opposition party on course for a combined record majority with Labour. Kenny says he plans to negotiate a compromise with the European Union and the IMF on the terms of Ireland's $85 billion bailout. French Foreign Minister Michel Alliot-Marie says she's fully committed to her job despite reports she's about to be sacked. Alliot-Marie has taken a public battering since taking a holiday to Tunisia during the country's popular uprising. She flew there in a plane belonging to a businessman with alleged ties to ousted President Ben Ali. In his strongest words yet to the Libyan leader, the U.S. president has called for Colonel Muammar Gaddafi to leave now. Barack Obama made the comments to the German Chancellor Angela Merkel on Saturday. The U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said the Libyan people had made their views clear. It comes as the United Nations Security Council is meeting to consider measures against Colonel Muammar Gaddafi's regime. The draft resolution calls for an arms embargo and assets freeze, but there is said to be discord over other details. Much of the rest of the country is in the hands of Gaddafi's opponents. In many banks have reopened in Gaza as the coalition now running the eastern city works to get life back to normal there. New video has emerged from the eastern city of Al-Baida showing one of Muammar Gaddafi's palaces. Parts of it were destroyed during the unrest as protesters tried to take over the city and drive out pro-Gaddafi forces. The palace had iron doors leading to underground tunnels, which are said to extend for several kilometers. A prominent leader from Bahrain's Shia opposition has arrived home from exile. In his absence, Hassan Mushaima was being tried for allegedly plotting a coup. But Bahrain's foreign minister says he's now been given a royal pardon. Meanwhile, several government ministers in Bahrain say they've been sacked. In Egypt, the judicial committee that's changing the constitution has proposed cutting presidential terms to 4 years with a 2-term limit. Meanwhile, Egypt's ruling military council has apologized after military police beat protesters during demonstrations in Cairo. It stressed it did not and would not issue orders to attack protesters. Enda Kenny, leader of Ireland's Fine Gael party, says he expects to form the country's next government. Early results put the opposition party on course for a combined record majority with Labour. Kenny says he plans to negotiate a compromise with the European Union and the IMF on the terms of Ireland's bailout. Engineers in New Zealand say at least a third of the buildings in central Christchurch must be demolished and rebuilt after Tuesday's earthquake. The death toll there has now reached 145, with more than 200 people still missing. Search teams from 6 countries are helping local rescuers, but no survivors have been found since Wednesday. Gunmen have attacked Iraq's biggest oil refinery, killing at